What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you my two best methods to AFK Greg. One is going to be an extremely AFK method and the other one is going to be extremely fast. So stay tuned if you need to get the Greg title or pet. Or you just want to make some money. Wait, what? So before I get too deep into this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about this method. So there were a few requirements that I needed to hit before I released this method. The first one was it had to be fully AFK, which means unfortunately I can't use the Blood Reaver, although I will go over a Blood Reaver method in the second part of this video. But it had to be fully AFK, so that meant no Blood Reaver. It also meant that I had to be able to like leave the room and come back, and most of the time the account wouldn't be dead. Anybody who's AFK'd Greg knows that it's kind of weird. The magic hits that fall from the ceiling can hit you 3 times in one game tick, which just stacks you out for like 4,500 damage plus whatever Greg hits. So it can be a little bit sketchy. And also when Greg teleports around, it sometimes your character doesn't attack correctly and he'll like take forever and then walk up and like poke the boss instead of using an ability, just because of how Revolution works. So because of those things, I needed this method to be as safe as possible while still getting fast enough kills, which leads me to the second requirement, which was I had to be getting under 1 minute kills, which this method does. Unfortunately, the gear requirements are pretty steep, but you get under 1 minute kills. It's pretty safe, it's reliable, and it's just a great method. As for the faster method, that method uses Berserk and full vestments. And it's I've had some problems with that method where it literally gets stacked out for 9,000 damage in like one game tick, because those 3 hits from the ceiling plus a Greg hit just like one-shots you kind of. So I'm not a huge fan of that method for fully AFKing. So to start off, I'm going to have the minimum level and quest requirements for this. This isn't going to be every single little requirement. There might be some little things I'm missing here, but these are the main ones. So first, you're going to need at least 95 prayer for soul split and turmoils. You're also going to need 99 or higher invention to be able to get the best perks, although I would highly suggest getting 120 or somewhere around that, so you can get a better shot at getting Relentless 5 Crackling 4, because that perk is awful to try to get without 120. You're also going to need 105 plus archaeology, although I would highly suggest 118 or a boost to 118 to be able to get conservation of energy, because I think that is better than heightened senses. You're also going to need 100 plus herblore to be able to make elder overloads. You're also going to need to do the temple at Seniston quest for curses, obviously, and then Prifdiness to get the elder overloads. So to start things off, I'm going to show the archaeology relics and perks that I use. So the relics that I use are Persistent Rage, and this is 100% required for this method. The box thing that you get from Zamorak does not work for this. You need to be able to regenerate the adrenaline in between kills and always be starting at 100%. So Persistent Rage is 100% required. I would also use Fury of the Small and say that is 100% required as well. You might as well use it. It's a pretty easy relic to get. And then Conservation of Energy. Now, this could be replaced with Heightened Senses if you don't have the archaeology level, but Conservation of Energy is better. As for the perks that I use, you can see I use the Impatient Venom Blood combo. You could also pair Venom Blood with Biting, but Venom Blood is 100% required for this method. I would use this over Ear Incense Sticks because it's free. I mean, why wouldn't you use this? Unless you don't want to make like a specific piece of gear for this or something, I would just use Venom Blood. It's just way easier than Sticks. Also, you can see I have Absorbative on there. I think Absorbative helps a lot for this method. Greg can do a lot of damage, like I said before, and Absorbative really helps for that. And then the other perks you use are just your standard best in slot PVMing perks like Crackling Relentless and Biting. So moving on to the preset and substitutable gear, you can see on screen here I have this is the preset that I use. It's got Quorum and Lantidime incense sticks. It also uses the Penance Aura, which is why I don't have Salves. And as for the absolutely 100% required items, the Jaws of the Abyss are 100% required. The Scrimshaw of Vampirism is again 100% required. And also obviously an Amulet of Souls and Zuck Cape and Cinderbanes are required, but you should probably have those anyway. You can see that I have 2 pieces of the Vestments of Havoc, which is again absolutely required for this. But then I use just a random augmentable plate body. I just use my custom fit masterwork one. You could probably get away with a tier 85 one. You can also see on screen there is another image that has Crypt Bloom boots. And this is perfectly fine to use as well. It gets pretty similar kill times. It's a little bit safer, but there's really no reason to use it if you don't have to. So unless you're really struggling with your account dying, I would just use the full melee armor setup. Moving on to the weapons, I highly suggest using the Abyssal Scourge and an offhand Leng or the tier 85 variant. It's just way faster and more reliable. You can also use the Masterwork Spear of Annihilation, which is pretty strong as well. But again, I would highly suggest using the Abyssal Scourge. You can also get away with a Scythe or a Lanikia's Spear, but they're just not that great. It's really not worth it if you're using like lower tier weapons like that with no like effects. I would just get a Scourge in the offhand. Like, it's not that much more expensive unless you're trying to get away with a Lanikia's Spear, I guess. As for the armor spikes, you don't need these, but they're really good for this, obviously. They add a bleed, so you get more basic ability adrenaline. They do damage. They're just all around a really solid item, but they do kind of cost a little bit to use. With this setup, I'm using normal Elder Overloads. Because I'm using the Penance Aura, I only use the Penance Aura for this. I would highly suggest just using the Penance Aura if you want to AFK. If you're trying to use Penance Powder, you have to use Salves, which really probably aren't worth it. Although you can use Penance Powder plus any aura you want if you use Salves, and it will be faster, obviously. But again, when I AFK these bosses, I always just try to use the Penance Aura. It's the most reliable. Everything else is just way more expensive or like tedious to use. Penance Powder is also very expensive to use, so I don't like to use that. You are going to absolutely need the Chaos Roar ability. This ability is insane with Massacre. It makes that ability hit just incredibly hard. So I would absolutely 100% require the Chaos Roar ability. It's also like free, so yeah, you might as well use it. Moving on to the gear requirement for the faster setup, you can see on screen here I have a full vestment set that's absolutely required to have the full Vestments of Havoc set, and I wouldn't really deviate from the setup you see on screen too much. The only differences you might be able to make would be using the alloy armor spikes are obviously better and recommended, and then using a superior Scrimshaw of Vampirism is also recommended as you take a little bit more damage, although both of the lower tier versions work perfectly fine as well. The main differences for this setup is that you most likely are going to want to use a Blood Reaver. It's probably not worth using this setup if you're not using a Blood Reaver, and because of that, you're also heavily incentivized, I should say, to use the Vampirism Aura and Penance Powder. If you're not using the absolute best stuff, it's not really worth using this setup. This setup gets about 40-second average kill times, whereas the other setup gets about 50 to 55-ish average kill times. So this one is quite a bit faster. I've gotten a kill down to 33 seconds, and I haven't done too many kills with this setup compared to the other one. So maybe even a sub 30 is possible. One disclaimer for this setup is that it is very unsafe, and this is not scalable at all. The account tends to get a lot of HP alarms with this setup because when it gets like triple stacked by the magic hits plus a range hits while you're zerked, you can get insta-killed basically. Like I have seen the account get hit for like 9,000 damage in one game tick, and obviously that's not super sustainable. So if you're trying to AFK a little bit more and you're not really going to be in the room, or you have like multiple accounts or something, I would definitely use the other setup over this one. But if you're going to be in the room or like watching the account and kind of just like low intensity killing Greg, this is definitely the setup for you. So to start this up, it's relatively simple. All you do is make sure your incense is activated, switch on your potion reservoir, put on a weapon poison, and then turn on penance, and then go in. And also make sure you turn on your scrimshaw. Then just go in, turn on your prayers, call your pet, and that's pretty much it. And you just pretty much sit here. This is the wrong bar. There we go. And that's pretty much it. So as you can see, the action bar is on screen here. And the main way that this setup works is you chaos roar initially off the bat and then immediately use massacre and then go into a dismember to start building up your bleeds as fast as possible. And massacre just does a massive amount of damage when you use chaos roar. It's actually kind of crazy. And then it pretty much just goes through a very simple ability rotation. There are a few things to note about this though. The first is it doesn't always work perfectly, or I should say, your character doesn't always attack Greg perfectly when he teleports from shadow to shadow. Like, I will put a clip on screen here. This is the berserking setup, but it is like a great example of what I mean. It just, your character gets like stuck because he'll jump between shadow to shadow, and by the time your character gets there, he either jumps again or revolution doesn't activate correctly, and your character just like auto attacks and then Greg jumps again. It's really weird when this happens. Usually it's not too big of a deal for you taking too much damage and like dying or anything, but it can really slow down your kill times, which is kind of annoying. Another thing to note is you will probably get some HP alarms. I have my Alt1 code in the description that you can import to your Alt1 if you want to use the same HP and whatever other things I use in there. There's like animate dead, HP, overload. There's like a bunch of stuff in that code. But you will get some HP alarms specifically because when Greg does the attack where he drops these magic hits from the ceiling, 3 of them can hit you at the exact same game tick, and it can really stack you out, especially if Greg doesn't splash at the same time. It's more of a problem with the berserking setup, but it can lead to taking a lot of damage and possible deaths. It's not super likely, but it does happen. Other things I've noticed are if your HP is below 50% before the kill starts, and you notice, it's a good idea to like eat a shark or Excalibur, because starting with less than 50% HP can be kind of sketchy, especially if you hit Ed. But yeah, you could see the kills per hour on screen as well as the action bars, and hopefully it helps some people. Thanks for watching, guys. If you made it this far, be sure to drop a like on the video. It really does help. But really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next one.